Good evening, everyone. It's your host, Moose. Got another Thunderdome podcast coming right at you. It's been a tough Tampa sports weekend for us all, but we have that one glimmer of hope with the Bolts starting on a new season. Let's hit that intro. Welcome once again to the Thunderdome podcast. It's your host, Moose. Hope you're having a great evening. Wanted to give our weekly update on the Lightning, of course. And we finally made it to opening night. You'll see on the ticker next to me kind of our topics for today. Wanted to go over the opening night roster, a few surprises on there. Of course, the notable omission with Braden Point. Kind of the news that came out once we finally signed him per our update last week. He actually went under the knife, a little bit of surgery, a little bit of recovery for him, so he wasn't going to be ready for opening night anyway. So he's injured in a scratch, and then, of course, a couple other surprises there. We'll talk about the Atlantic Division briefly. Already some surprises, at least in my opinion. We'll talk about where I think the Bolts will end up and what that division's going to shore up to be. We're going to look at the home and away openers, both against the Florida Panthers, those pesky Panthers, our hockey brothers down south in Miami, or in Sunrise, I should say. Take a look at both those games. I'm making this video after our third game of the season already, after Carolina, but we'll leave that one for our fourth episode of the podcast. Kind of a disappointing game against the Hurricanes tonight, but we'll leave that one be. We'll talk about that one next week. And then kind of the road ahead, Lightning opening with kind of a weird opening schedule, I guess. That's kind of the perks of being in the Atlantic for us. Part of the deal of us doing all the traveling into Canada. We get all the holiday games. We get some pretty extended homestands. But with that, we also get some kind of weird away periods of time, and we're starting off the season with one, so we'll kind of get into that as well. So let's look at the opening night roster and go over a few of the, I guess, surprises, or maybe I wasn't expecting a few people to make the team, or at least one individual to make the team. So let's bring up the opening roster straight from TampaBayLightning.com off of their Twitter. Of course, our great Captain Steven Stamkos as the model. So, as to be expected, Cirelli, Gord, Johnson, my big breakout player candidate, as we talked about in episode 2, Matthew Joseph, who's had a strong showing these last few opening games. Kaloran Kucherov, one of my favorite acquisitions, Pat Maroon. Andre Palat, who's on our watch list, of course. He really needs to show up early in the season to make his presence felt. 8 goals all of last season, a little bit of injury, a little bit of being scratched. Definitely a disappointing season for him last year. That kind of got lost in the shuffle of Lightning eclipsing 130 points in the standings almost. Jamel Smith was one I actually totally forgot he was an acquisition. So when I saw his name, I was like, who's Jamel Smith? I know he spent some time with in the Dallas organization, and again, a pretty solid fourth liner, which I'd expect to be paired with Pat Maroon and, of course, Captain Steven Stamkos. But the surprise for me, of course, Carter Verhaeghe, coming up through Syracuse, an alum. The Lightning actually had a really neat graphic, and I should have put it on there. Of all, like, more than half the team are Syracuse alums, if not 3/4 of our team being homegrown through the minor league system and making the big club and contributing and being successful. So just Carter Verhaeghe, another one of those homegrown talents, long time coming, 24-year-old rookie, spent 3 or 4 years down in Syracuse really paying his dues, improving his game, and he's already being asked to play some second line minutes and some power play time as well. Got his first career assist against the Panthers in game 2, so he's off and running. So he's one that we were kind of looking out for in camp, and is he going to make the team? Is he not going to make the team? And I really appreciate JBB and Coach Cooper always giving at least one guy a shot to make that opening night roster, despite how loaded we are. Maybe part of that is the fortuitous injury to Braden Point and even Paquette being out for a little bit of time with kind of an egregious hit over the preseason from a Panthers player. But really getting a chance to make the team and make his impression and make sure that that Carter works hard to make sure that to show the team that he deserves to stay on, even when Paquette and Point make their way back onto the roster. So Carter Verhaeghe, welcome to the team. Hopefully you're able to stay a little bit as they return from injury. So defenseman Erik Cernak had a very unexpectedly awesome year last year, and again, he just grew at an amazing pace. He was playing second pairing and sometimes first pairing minutes with a little bit of injury that we had last year, and honestly surpassing Girardi and even Coburn at times as being healthy scratch, just because it was hard to have Cernak sit out despite him being young. I was happy with the Braden Coburn signing. I think he's a solid third pairing defenseman. He should be spending minutes with either Ruda as he pulls in Sergachev. This has really got to be your chance to show that you deserve the second or first pairing. Right now we've been seeing him kind of hop in and out with Victor Hedman on the first pairing, but really I think he's going to end up drawing into the third, which, again, hopefully part of the growth curve. Hedman, of course, and McDonough. Jan Ruda should be rotating in and out. We talked a little bit about Sergei. This really is where we expect him to start taking some steps forward. I know we talked about Pat Maroon being one of my favorite acquisitions. I think thus far, Kevin Shattenkirk has exceeded all expectations of what I thought we would see from him in the first few games. I think he's up to 2 goals after tonight's game in Carolina. Spending serious time in the power play and actually being physical as well. He's not just taking the place and waiting up top for offensive opportunities. He's being physical and really pushing the issue for the team. And I like the Luke Witkowski ad. We talked about it last episode. I think what's really interesting is where they're playing people, because Witkowski, of course, a traditional defenseman. We actually have him rolling on the fourth line right now, which is really interesting. Really interesting to me. So our fourth line, which game one, to be honest with you, I was like, Jamel Smith looks kind of a step slower than everyone else. Pat Maroon had a fantastic game, but Witkowski, I don't know. I hope they keep that line together. I love Paquette, and he certainly brings that edginess to the fourth line if he's rotating in there. But Witkowski has had some surprising speed and moves for a big guy, and I love the physicality of that fourth line. I mean, they were out there and they were trusted by Cooper in Game 2, and we'll talk about our away opener with the Panthers, Game 2 of the home and home. That fourth line was sent in there to control, and when the game was starting to get out of hand, they were in there to kind of have some equilibrium or balance out what was going on with the offensive struggles of the team. And of course, as we talk about Game 2, already some line shifting going on with Cooper. Second line is interesting. You have for Hagee on there drawing in. Paired up with Yanni Gord and Tyler Johnson kind of hopping in and out. It's what I like about our lines. They're fairly fluid. Line 1, of course, Stamkos with Kucherov. And again, kind of hopping in and out with Johnson and a little bit of... We've seen Palat in there as well. Matthew Joseph kind of jumping in 2 and 3, depending on where Cooper wants him. And again, I expect Matthew Joseph to have a great breakout year. He's looked good so far, last few games. Kucherov kind of disappeared again. Game 2 of the Panthers. and most of our top guns did. But again, it's that we got to have. It's going to be games like that. Secondary scoring's got to be there for us, and also scoring from the blue line, which we are already seeing that we're getting from Kevin Shattenkirk, already up to 2 goals. We're excited for that. Then, of course, I want to forget our goaltenders. The big change, of course, Curtis McElhinney now the backup instead of Louis Domingue. Louis Domingue down in Syracuse. Part of that was definitely part of that. I've heard rumors through chat rooms and various forums, the little bit of team issue and attitude issue. Curtis McElhinney has been a solid backup throughout his time in the NHL. Never truly a number one, maybe never given really a chance. But I think he'll be a solid backup to Vasilevsky, and I think a good value and a better move in terms of salary cap, especially with some of the pressure that's coming up, not only to have signed Braden Point before the season started, but we're definitely going to be playing some cap roulette in the upcoming years to see who we end up keeping and who's going to become expendable at trade deadlines or at the draft, for instance. So that's the opening night roster. I'm liking the composition. I expect Braden Point to slide in to line 1, line 2, just like Cooper likes to roll them and move them around if things are getting stale, even in the same game. We already saw some line combination shifting in game 2, but that comes with the Cooper mentality. So let's talk about the Atlantic Division now. In my opinion, probably one of the most difficult division in the NHL. We've got some truly top-tier teams. I think it's no surprise that my pick for number 1 and perhaps unanimous pick across the NHL is going to be Tampa Bay in the 1 slot. But really the question is who's going to line up behind them. I think 2 and 3 for sure. Toronto, Boston. I think that's where the battle's going to be. I think Toronto edges them out. So we'll go Lightning. We'll go Leafs. We'll go Boston 3. Now I think 4 and 5 is where it gets really interesting, especially again, I know a 2-game sample isn't the end all say all of wow, we know exactly what we have, but the Florida Panthers, especially with Sergei Bobrovsky, are a different team, and they are a better team. And I think the Lightning saw that firsthand. I mean, last year, usually a cakewalk against the Panthers. This year, they are a different team. Bobrovsky's already making world-class saves in Game 1 and Game 2 against the Lightning. And I think that gives them confidence. I think they're coached better. You have Coach Q behind the bench for the Panthers. And I want to put the Panthers in the 4th slot, first wild card in the Atlantic Division. And I think the Atlantic gets 2 teams in the playoffs in the wild card this year. And I'm really liking the Buffalo Sabres. I think the Sabres progress this year and end up in the 5 slot. Then that leaves Montreal 6. I think I'm going to put Detroit 7 and Ottawa 8. So let's go through that again. It's going to go Lightning, Leafs, Bruins, Panthers, Sabres. Who'd I have at 6? I know I have Red Wings, Ottawa. Who am I missing at 6? Yes, Carey Price and the Canadiens at 6. I think the Red Wings stay down at 7, missing the playoffs. And then, of course, the struggling Ottawa Senators down at the bottom in the 8th spot in the Atlantic. So we'll see how that goes. Definitely 3 games through, we're not seeing that. You'll see at the ticker down below, we only have the Game 1 and Game 2 standings for most of the teams. I think the Leafs have played 3 through Saturday when our ticker was updated. We'll make sure to have up-to-date ticker when we get to episode 4 for the Thunderdome podcast. But yeah, I'm liking the Lightning. I think it's going to be really interesting to see where the Panthers end up as long as they get the consistent goaltending. And, I mean, they were a top power play team last year. I think they were number 2 behind the Lightning. And with Mike Hoffman, I mean, Mike Hoffman's already scored 4 goals, all against the Lightning in the first 2 games, including a hat trick. I mean, anything's possible for the Panthers. I think they're going to be a little bit better defensively, and I think they make the playoffs this year. Maybe we'll have our first Lightning Panthers playoff series. We haven't had that in each team's 25 years of existence. I think it's time for that first Lightning Panthers playoff series. I'm calling it round 1. Lightning Panthers for the first round of the 2020 NHL playoffs. So let's move on to our home opener a few days ago against the Florida Panthers. And, you know, I'm a subscriber to NHL.tv. I'm probably going to watch about 60 to 65 Lightning games a year. So I was ready on my couch, getting home from work to see this game. And this was vintage Lightning from last year. I mean, it's almost business as usual. Solid 5-2 win against the Panthers at home for our opening night. I mean, I don't know what the statistics are for our opening night games. I know we've won quite a few over the last few years. Always getting off on that great start. Let's look at some of the stat lines, and of course, these are brought to you by NHL.com. Cooch with a absolute snipe to get the game going in the first period, and again, that was 6:39 into the period. It looked just like business as usual. Cooch scoring with we had the extra attacker on a delayed penalty, and I mean, it was just an absolute clinic of puck movement and basically a wide open net to snipe one in, top shelf past Bobrovsky. Hoffman had a good goal in the second, and then Kevin Shattenkirk, I believe that was on the power play. The Bolts went 1 for 3 on the power play. I believe that was the power play goal. Shattenkirk from Sergei and Killorn in the second. And then what I really want to talk about, of course, the big goal from Pat Maroon. Had a great graphic up during the telecast with the Lightning broadcast team, basically showing dots of where Pat Maroon's goals have come the past few years, and they're all right around the goal net. It was amazing, and sure enough, that goal was right around the goal, just digging a dirty goal right around the actual mouth of the goal. I think the big story for me, though, was seeing Andre Palat with just a renewed fire in his game. I mean, he looked so much better, so much faster. I just truly think that last year, I don't know, they talked about his workout regimen that the year before he went really heavy with weights, and honestly, that's what he looked like. He looked a little bit slower, like he was just behind everyone by a step or two. I mean, he's always been a strong power forward-esque type player, but I mean, especially game 1 and game 2, I mean, he looked like he was on another level where he really revamped his training to focus on speed and agility, and you could tell he was there, forechecking. Andre Palat, I am really excited for what you can accomplish this year, and he's already off to a great start for goal number 1 in the home opener. Love Patrick Maroon's game. Again, he just brings that physicality that was needed in the playoffs, and I know we're talking playoffs in game 2 out of 82, right? But it's been a weak point, and it's been a weak point for the Lightning every time we've made the playoffs, probably in the Steve Yzerman era where we just didn't have that toughness. I mean, we really gritted out some wins when we played against the Blackhawks and made the finals against the Blackhawks, and we made the Eastern Conference Finals a year or two ago against the Capitals. I mean, we were able to grit it out, but it's that extra level of nastiness and being able to just keep pace with other players and keep check on other players as well, and the offensive players from the other teams. We need players like Pat Maroon, and honestly, what I've seen from Luke Witkowski and Jamel Smith, I mean, that's like the Bash Brothers line to me. They're able to score offensively. They've got some moves. Jamel Smith made a great move in the away opener to free himself up and have a great scoring opportunity. I'm loving that line. I don't know what that looks like when Seti comes back, but I like what I've seen, at least for the home opener and the away opener for those two lines. So just looking here at the final stats, kind of a typical stat line that we saw last year. Teams, sometimes our offensive pressure opens us up for return pressure. Panthers out shooting the Lightning 37-30. But this is really the big stat here and what gives us advantage. 61-39 face-off advantage, which usually in any game that we struggled last year is because we lost the face-off battle. Lightning 1 for 3 on the power play, and honestly, asterisk could have been 3 for 3. One goal coming on the extended advantage or the delayed penalty, and 2 of those opportunities that we didn't convert on actually were like within a second or 2 of the penalty expiring. So this is actually a little bit deceiving here. I know technically it's 1 out of 3, but this potentially could have been 3 out of 3 here. And of course the rest kind of even. Bobrovsky going 18 out of 21 total in the for even strength. Of course, 25 out of 29 for 862 save percentage. Vasi a lot closer to 95%. So again, game 1, great success. Looked like a vintage Lightning game from the 2018-2019 season, that's for sure. We just felt comfortable all the way, but the Panthers did look a lot better. It wasn't a rollover Panthers type of game at all. It was just Lightning were executing and getting the job done. So then you get into our away opener, so kind of our home and home. Next game went down to Sunrise to play the Panthers, and we didn't play badly. I think the Panthers the Panthers are a good team. I think we can't forget that. If we're going to play 5 or 6 times over a season in our divisional series that we have against our division opponents, they're going to get a couple wins. I don't think, seeing what I saw at the opener, I don't think this was a team we were going to sweep for the season series by any means. But again, kind of falling behind the 8 ball early. They were up 3-0, I think, in the first period. So before we even got into the first intermission, the second intermission, they went up 3-1 with Jamel Smith coming up with our first goal of the game, and again with Kowski and Maroon. That fourth line is solid, and I know Cooper relied on them to keep the peace during this game, because this game got chippy for sure. But the big story, Mike Hoffman, 3 goals with his the first hat trick in Panthers opening game history. Belongs to Mike Hoffman. I was impressed by the game by Noah Acciari, former product of the Boston Bruins, where we kind of faced him in the playoffs a few times. Kind of a younger defenseman, up and coming, a little bit of an offensive threat. He looked great. I think I heard his name numerous times over the broadcast. He was flying. He was having an impact. So again, I think that was a great add by the Panthers, and we already paying dividends. Stammer getting on the board, and of course Matthew Joseph making it interesting at the end. But to be quite honest with you, the Panthers had this game in control. I think the first period was fairly even. I think Vasi made some pretty tremendous saves to keep us in it. Same thing with Bobrovsky. I think he made 2 or 3 sprawling saves to really make the difference. But this was just a game that the Panthers are better at. Again, if you want to, let's look at those vital statistics. We did win the face-off battle, and we actually won the shots on goal, but concerns here. We talked about penalties potentially being a concern in one of our first 2 shows, where penalty killing was going to be critical in dictating the success of this team. We were among the top teams last year, and that's we were the number 1 power play team, and I think we were 1 or 2 in the PK, which that is a formula for winning 55, 56, 57 games and 120 points. right now we're really struggling, and I want to say the statistics were fairly the same for the Carolina game. I think we gave up multiple power play goals again. So here, pretty even over here in terms of hits, blocks, giveaways, takeaways. Vasi, 24 out of 28. He was in the 85%. This time with Bobrovsky, 32 out of 35. Curious about the ice time and where our team has ended up. Well, Shattenkirk leading the team. I'm liking the pairing with Shattenkirk and Hedman. I think we were really intending it for it to be Sergei's time to really make that jump to the first pairing. But I am really liking the Shattenkirk-Hedman pairing. I think there's chemistry there. I don't think we break that up unless something egregious happens that we need to flop defensive pairings. They are starting to build some trust, and that's truly an offensive threat there. I mean, Victor is such a leading offensive threat and always in the conversation for the Norris. But having Shattenkirk there to supplement that is pair that with the top line. That's an all-star line on its own. Having our first liners with our first defensive pairing and Vasilevsky all on the ice at once. Oh my gosh, that's a dream come true right there, right? Looks like McDonough's pairing up with Chernak, which I like that. Chernak's just kind of a solid young defenseman. Doesn't get enough credit yet. Definitely not a household name yet. And then, Killer. I think was consequences of being shorthanded. Yep, there you go. Tyler Johnson getting some quality time, and Sorelli and Kuchen Stamkos, of course, usually are top ice time getters on offense. A little disappointed with Matthew Joseph's only 9 minutes there. Verhaeghe down to 9 minutes as well. Oh well. Hopefully that's why it's a long season. Let's look at the Carolina game, and I know I'll talk about this more in depth, but just as I thought, 2 out of 5 here. Losing the face-off percentage battle. Oof, look at this. I'm not going to get to... I haven't even seen the highlights of it, so I'm just going off of stats for the Panthers game. Let me pull the stats up here. 2 out of 5 on the power play again. 3 for 5 on the penalty kill. So again, 60% penalty killing is not going to get the job done. Almost 60-40 on the face-offs, and basically tripled up on shots. Being outshot by 31 shots. It's amazing to me that we had 3 shots on 3 goals, and we're leading this game 3-1 at one point. I mean, absolutely incredible. From what I've read, I haven't seen I haven't seen the highlights. McElhinney had a heck of a game, so we'll get into that one more in depth for our next episode. Just wanted to close out today with our road ahead, because our road ahead is really interesting, and I think the schedule makers always try to do us a few favors, especially with as part of the gentleman's agreement of being in the Atlantic Division and all the Canadian travel we get to do and all the Northern travel we get to do, is that we get games during the holidays and lots of games during prime, snowbird weather, so we can attract fans and keep our 200-plus game sellout streak going, which we really don't need that. We have plenty of Lightning fans that fill up that stadium, and plenty of Lightning fans that are willing to make a quick buck and sell their tickets to Canadians fans for triple face value. But neither here nor there. That's capitalism, right? But if you look over here, this is the Lightning's road, and I know it's a little bit difficult to see for the next about week and a half or so. So, of course, leaving Sunrise, Florida, and then playing tonight against the Hurricanes up in Raleigh, North Carolina. They'll actually come home for a few days, practice a day or two, then they're off to their Canadian road trip. So they'll play in Toronto, then they'll play over in Ottawa, and then they end up in Montreal. Then they go to Boston, and then they are finally back in the friendly confines of Amalie Arena to face good team, the Colorado Avalanche like a week and a half or 2 weeks from now. So a little bit of time away for the Lightning and really no home games for the next week or two. But this is a tough stretch of games to open up the season. I mean, these are your competitors in your division, all of which are good teams. Like, I think we don't particularly play well in Ottawa. It just doesn't even matter that they're not a great team. I wouldn't be surprised if we find a way to lose that one. Montreal is always a house of horrors. Playing in Boston's never fun for the Lightning, though they've had a pretty good streak against the Bruins over the last few years. So, fingers crossed for that, that we do well over there at TD. And again, Toronto is always a kind of a crapshoot as well. They're playing at Air Canada Center, never an easy destination for the Bolts. So, if you were counting on Carolina being a win, where we end up with an OTL, we're going into a 4-game stretch here at 1-1-1, with 6 out of our first 7 games being on the road. I mean, we could potentially have a losing record coming back on the back end, coming to face Colorado. I mean, I think the Leafs have been playing pretty well. Maybe we lose the Leafs game. Maybe we win the Ottawa Senators game, but we definitely lose one of the two against Boston and Montreal. I mean, I think we're coming back even. 2-2-2, maybe 2-3-2. I think if we're lucky, we'll be lucky to be above 7 points. Right now being at 2 or 3. If we can get to 8 points on this road trip, so we have 4. Yeah, if we can get 4 or 5 points on this road trip, I think that's a successful road trip, and hopefully we get some momentum playing back at home in the next week and a half. So it's kind of the road ahead for the Lightning. These are the teams we have to play, and these are all 4-point games within the division. So these games do matter even here in October. We got to take them seriously. We have to put our best efforts, and we could already start putting distance between teams. And the earlier we start doing that, the better. I mean, it's just going to be challenging, especially with everyone gunning for us with the season we had last year. So that is it for us, the Thunderdome Podcast. Thank you so much for your time. You've been looking down below at our stats. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at $10 Sports. Mike is wrapping up his vacation, and he'll be back next week for $10 Sports. We should have that up Wednesday or Thursday. I'll likely be doing Bucking Hangover tomorrow as a reaction to this Buccaneers game against the Saints game. We'll hold it in, and we'll talk about it tomorrow on the Bucking Hangover. But hang in there, Bolts fans. It's going to be a long couple weeks on the road. We'll have the next Thunderdome podcast probably towards the end of next week. We'll go over the Carolina game, the Leafs game, and potentially the Ottawa Senators game. Probably just be those 2 games catching up, and of course catching up on any other NHL news. A couple signings I want to go over as well. Some teams working through very similar issues like we did, getting their RFAs signed and ready to join the team. So it's been Moose with the Thunderdome Podcast. We appreciate you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that like button on the video as well. We will see you next week.